And everything around us is energy. And what's interesting is some of our greatest scientists have said that you cannot end energy. Einstein said you can't end energy, that it simply changes form. And when we think about the Egyptians, and you see all that effort they go through with the tombs, the pyramids, and the mummies, why do you think they did that? What could they have possibly been copying that might be around us? And why would they have done that? When I think of the Egyptians and I think of them wrapping the mummies, I think about wrapping the caterpillar with the cocoon. And all of the sarcophaguses over them have these little depictions with this winged being. So weren't they trying to teach us something that they had a greater knowledge of? Because we're energy and everything around us is energy, everything is constantly moving. And there are so many layers on the onion that it's difficult most of the time to perceive what's truly around us. But then when you have validations, when you have somebody tell you, you don't need to go get a checkup from the neck up, they're feeling the same thing, then it's a reminder that you're okay and that these things exist. One of the things that I think is important to recognize is that we have power over them because we're both physical and we're spirit. We're energy. We have the power to order them to leave if they're making us uncomfortable. That exists within us, if you believe it. If you have doubt, fear, lack, then you don't have power over these things. And while we talk about ghosts and spirits, there's many people who automatically go to a fear-based thought process. And yet in the simplistics of it all is we create our own drama there. Very seldom are there spirits that are really going to be that harmful or trying to cause us that big of a problem. But they do exist, and so it's the totality of the whole takes a hit because of the few. And most of the time when I'm dealing with those few energies, it's the life that they lived. It's somebody who's doing drugs and gets hit in a car and gets killed and thrown out of their body, and they don't even realize that they've crossed over, and so they attach to the nearest thing with warmth around them, something they can pull energy off of. And when they do come around, they pull energy. They'll pull things from, you'll see your lights going dimmer like they show on television. That's actually true to a certain extent. They can always exaggerate it to make it appear greater. But not all of them. In fact, the majority of them are more like Casper or friendly ghosts, so they're user-friendly. What's really interesting is I hadn't paid attention, but within the store itself, there is a spirit. There is a spirit of a young girl. Over the years, I've come to know her, and she can be playful. We had a journal that had a really wicked-looking picture of a female on there with long nails, and just, she did not like that journal. And for almost a month, Don and I would come into the store every morning, and that journal would be face down on the floor. And I moved it to several different locations. And another point in time, I was standing there talking to a friend of mine who is a very enlightened being. And we would have these long conversations, and his wife, they would come down from Ohio, and she had Parkinson's, so every time they would come in, I'd do some healing work on her, and it would calm her down for a month or a month and a half. So every time they would come down, they'd bring her in for healing. And we were standing there talking one day, and the door opened. And they looked at the door, looked at me, and she went over and closed the door back up, and I saw, a lot of times we don't see the full apparition. It's every now and then we might, depending on how much they want to work with us. Even when we're doing readings, you know, it's up to the spirits on the other side to reveal when they're ready and at their time. We can't force them to come in and talk to us. That's why in Casadega, there's a disclaimer there that if you're wanting to talk to a certain person and they don't show up, but a lot of times I find if we use their name, they want to come forward. If they know that we're trying to communicate with them, there's that effort there. If we're going to listen, they'll be more inclined to come back again. If we ignore them and don't pay attention when they're giving us some kind of advice that's coming into our thoughts, almost like we may perceive it to be just a part of our own thought process. But it has a slightly new outside the box turn to it, because they're trying to give us advice, they're trying to help us, but if we ignore it, then why bother spending the energy that it takes to try to help us, to try to let us know they're there for us. So, but most of the time we just see partials. And so I saw like a wisp of smoke at the door, and I knew the girl was there because I could see the size of that wisp of smoke. And I said to the woman at that time, I said, she's going to open that door back up. She wants it open. And she looked at me, and all of a sudden the door opened back up. And it was the front door to the store. And Dawn is allergic to cats. And about that same time, this cat was coming up the steps and coming into that front door. They were both watching, still looking at the door from it being opened. She slammed that door shut, knowing that we don't let cats in the store, and both of them jumped. That door slammed with such a force, and I hadn't even thought about that in a little while, because I just know she's there, and when something's there every day, we don't really give it too much thought. It just becomes a part of the normal. But last night, my good friends Ron and Liz were here, which Liz is doing the class after this one. And I walked outside, and she said, "You know, you got a little spirit here, a young girl." And I said, I hadn't thought about it in a little while. And they had been sitting there talking to her, and she was answering over one of the type of meters that they use for communication. And it's funny because they asked her if she knew Shaman Jeff, and she put on their device, Exorcist. And of course Liz explained to her that she's not a problem here. She's more than welcome for as long as she wants to stay. But then every now and then you run into spirits that are causing problems. Somebody gets scratched, something happens. One of the incidents I ran into was a farmhouse up in North Florida, in which they had 4 other shamans come out trying to get this spirit to cross over, and it wouldn't cross over. Well, I talked to the spirit when I went out there for this family, because it was scratching the young male in the family and causing problems in dreams and stuff and nightmares. And so I understood why afterwards, after communicating with the spirit. They were going in and they were just going to try to force it out. When we force something out, when we just shove it away, sometimes that's not the right thing to do. sometimes we want to communicate and ask it to go to the light. And we can actually talk to these spirits just like I'm talking to you. We can explain to them, even if they're attached to somebody, we can say that you'll be making this person really tired. Their health will be weaker. They're carrying this extra weight that they're not meant to carry. And even though it's minor, it's still pulling at them, and it can change your thought process. You know, if you get a spirit attached to you and that spirit likes chocolate or likes alcohol, it can start sending up these thoughts to you constantly. You like chocolate. You know, it's sort of like you walk in the store and I plant that subconscious thought, you want to buy everything in this store. You love it all. And so they can actually affect our thought process. In fact, there's a lady named Edith Fiore who is a clinical psychologist, and she was working with schizophrenics and working with bipolar disorder. And she found out through hypnosis and through working with these people that they actually had attached spirits, and so they were having a dual thought process going on. And she took it a step further. She's written a book, it's called The Unquiet Dead. And it tells you how to talk to these spirits, how to help them cross over, to explain to them that they don't belong here. So I'm out at this farmhouse and I walked around, it's 5 acres, and I found where the spirit was, and I just sat down on the ground and I started asking it what the problem was. And there was actually 2 spirits there. There was a young male energy and there was also this older energy. And apparently the older energy had been abusive to the younger energy, the young male spirit. And because their feelings there were of judgment, they were afraid to cross over. And that was the whole problem. You know, if you order it to leave, you don't know where it's going to go. But if you can communicate from your heart and let them know that there's love there for them, there's ancestors on the other side that are going to be waiting there for them to help them cross over, then the dynamics and that fear factor goes away. When you tell them that they're not going to be judged, they're here many times, and they're only here to learn. They're not the events that happen in their life unless they choose to be. And so they stay. They were afraid to go. But they left after I left because I talked to them and I asked them to go into the light and that there wouldn't be judgment there and to trust it. And I called upon a couple of their ancestors to come in and help them cross over to make it easier. Another instance that I had was a house in St. Pete where there were twin sisters living. And there were scratches appearing on the wall and scratches on the floor. And these spirits were really raising a lot of fear and raising a lot of energy. And the 2 girls who were twins were very fearful. And so I made an agreement I would go out. I should have told them not to say anything, because they did say something. One girl said to the spirits in the house, and they could hear them, the 2 girls could. They said that the priest is coming out today. And they heard a laugh, and they heard a comment, "Let the games begin." And when they told me that, I figured, well, so much for my surprise element, so much for they can plot out now. And so the first thing I did was I lit sage. Sage is not going to cleanse out a spirit that's malicious. It's only going to piss them off. And that was my intention, was to knock them a little bit off balance. Sage is good for getting rid of negative energy. But when it comes to actual spirits and ones that are dug in like an Alabama tick, it becomes a little difficult for them to be knocked loose with sage. But I did make them very angry, because when I went upstairs, I saw this wisp of smoke next to the bookshelf. And all of a sudden a book came flying off of the bookshelf at me, and I ducked under it, and the two girls, their eyes got great big, and down the stairs they were headed at a rapid rate. And I looked over and I said, "Oh, you'll be gone by the time I leave here today. You may think it's fun right now, but you're not staying." And so then my next step is I went and layered another thing in there, because I used the holy wood, the Palo Santo, which is putting another element of discomfort for them in that area. And then, as the last resort, I sat down on the floor in the living room and I lit up the chanupa, the prayer pipe for the Native American shamans. I'm a pipe carrier for 3 nations. I carry the pipe for the Lakota, I carry the pipe for the Ojibwa, and I carry the pipe for the Cherokee. Now, my Lakota pipe was gifted to me from Sun Bear. When he crossed over, he left me his personal prayer pipe. And so it is said that anything you put through the prayer pipe or the chanupa in the form of prayer, as being a pipe carrier, you carry the responsibility of taking care of your tribe. When they come to you and make an offering of tobacco and ask you to do a prayer for them, you're obligated to honor the pipe that you carry by doing that. And they've made an exchange of energy in presenting you with tobacco. But it's just a part of the obligation and a part of that energy that you carry and you've agreed to carry by accepting the role of being that person that carries the prayer for the nation. And so it's a tremendous responsibility, but it's said that anything you put through a prayer pipe is going to happen. And so you want to be very careful. I know you've heard the sayings before, be careful what you ask for, because you might just get it. And that is the case with the prayer pipe also. You want to be careful of your intention and the prayers you're putting into it. As a pipe carrier, if you dishonor, if you're not complete in your intent and coming from your heart, the chanupa stops working with you. The prayer pipe stops working with you. It's a responsibility. And there's a lineage of spirituality that has to be followed, a protocol in all that you do. And so I sat down on the floor and I lit the prayer pipe, honored the directions, and asked the ancestors to come in from the different directions to help, to remove these beings, help them cross over that no longer belong here, to bring peace back into the life of these 2 girls. And at the end of that ceremony, I sat there and watched. And the spirits were so thick in that house that it was like smoky, even though I had done the sage and the Palo Santo long ago. But the spirits themselves had gotten so thick in there, you could just feel the temperature going up. And I watched as this battle ensued, and one by one, because there were multiple spirits that had been opened up in there. As the smoke got thinner and thinner and kept moving towards the one door I had left open to take them out of. And it just kept getting lighter and lighter till the last one was gone. And I turned to the 2 girls and I said, the only way you can have this kind of buildup of energy is if somebody's working with magic and doing drugs or alcohol. And right away they went into total denial. And I said, I feel like it's a younger energy. And the one said she had an 18-year-old son and he does practice magic, but there's no way he'd be involved with drugs or alcohol. Well, he got busted 3 weeks later with drugs. But when these spirits, when we open those doorways of losing our discernment, we're opening these doorways that let things in. Usually a lot of times we'll encounter spirits at like a graveyard. So I love going to graveyards. Just me. I never said I was quite right anyway. And hospitals is another place you can pick up entities, and bars. A lot of times these spirits, if they're drunk and they have an accident, and they may head to a bar. I know in Bradenton, when I go on Liz's stuff, I'm always warned to not invite anybody to have rum with me. But there's so much going on around us all the time, and there's so many spirits out there, but not every spirit is there to cause us a problem. And we have to have discernment, and that's why we need to be in the presence of ourself. You know, doing the prayer pipe, there's so many rumors out there that the Native Americans smoked marijuana in the prayer pipe. No, they didn't. Anyone that tells you that, they may be smoking marijuana and trying to find a way to justify it that it's a spiritual thing. But when Native Americans went into prayer, whenever we did ceremony, one of our protocol is to say, "Come as you are." And that means not on alcohol, not on drugs. And I will put gatekeepers, whatever doorway I'm going to leave open, whether it's the west to honor the Lakota or the east to honor the Cherokee. Who's ever greeting you at that doorway, saging you before you come into the circle, because everything in that higher energy circle has to be spiritually cleansed. And so before you even step into that circle, you're going to be saged. You're going to be feathered and saged. And if you come in on alcohol or drugs, they know immediately that you'll be tarred and feathered rather than just feathered with sage. But you will be sent away. It's through the weakest link sometimes that these spirits that aren't invited may try to come in. And so you want to monitor that kind of energy. Anytime you're in deep prayer, anytime you're working with things, or even towards manifestation, you don't want to be working with it if you're going to go have drinks beforehand. You know, you can time your events to enjoy your life without causing difficulty by placing yourself in an environment that's unfamiliar to you and inviting these things into your life. Other times they're just there because they've always been there. But until they're causing a problem, most of the time for most people, unless you're somebody who's very sensitive, you won't even be aware of their presence. And it's almost every day. It's like I had forgotten all about that little girl almost, because she's just there. I just accept it, and it's a part of life. And she's never made me feel uncomfortable. You yourself have to use your own discernment if something feels comfortable to you or something feels uncomfortable. And trust that energy. Trust your heart. Don't argue with it from your head. I mean, you've heard a lot of rumors about the Ouija boards and stuff like that. Is the Ouija board bad? Is that what's causing the problem? No. The Ouija board is just what it is. It's working with energy. But it's us, if we're going to use it, then we have to have the discernment. We can't be sitting there playing on a Ouija board when we're drinking alcohol or doing drugs. We can't be playing on a Ouija board if we don't have the knowledge to at least do a little prayer and ask for protection around us, knowing that we're asking spirits to come in and talk to us. Discernment. Knowing that you're opening up a gateway that's unfamiliar to most of us, unless you've done a lot of studying or very adept. But for the most part, they give it to kids and stuff. You can go down to the local toy store and buy this Ouija board. Or really any other form of divination can open a doorway. But there's wisdom in just saying a simple prayer and asking for protection, making sure you're in safe space. I had one incident in which the person was actually intentionally sent a spirit. I was working out of one of the stores that used to be in Tampa called the House of Seven Windows. And I would teach classes there once a week. And the girl, one of the girls who couldn't afford to pay for classes and didn't have transportation, I would go by and pick her up for the class because I knew that she wanted to learn and that it was a good thing for her. And so one day she called me up and she was crying because somebody had left this jar on her doorstep, and it was sealed with wax, and it had broken glass in it and razor blades and bent nails and some kind of fluid, and had runes on the outside of it, and it said, "Open this jar and watch what happens to your world." So I took the jar to my house, and I put her and my daughter in a circle of protection. And I sat outside of it and opened the jar. And I told the energy that was coming out of that jar to return to your sender or return back to the light immediately. You're not welcome here. Remember that we have power over these things. And it doesn't matter how they got here or what vengeance or anger or anything else is attached to it. We still have power over it. Sometimes we have to raise our voice. Sometimes we have to let it know that, no, we're in charge. You're not going to open up a doorway of fear that you have power over me. You're not going to get me to feed those lesser energies of doubt, fear, and lack. I'm going to rise above those. And so it went back, it disappeared. About 3 hours later, I got a phone call from one of the readers at the House of Seven Windows that told me that they were in this house. These two girls had called them, and there was a spirit there that was throwing things every direction and making a shambles of their house, and that somehow she knew my energy was attached to it. And I told her the story of what just happened, and she knew me well enough to know that something they were doing was not really kosher. And so I'm sure she had a talk with them, although I didn't need to know about it. But there's so much that goes on in our everyday life that we don't see. There's so many layers of the onion. There are chants that you can do that clear energy. I can remember one of my roommates, I lived with this girl, Cancer, for about 4 years, and we were just friends, strictly platonic, and we were studying together and learning together, and decided we were going to clear the house. Well, I used to work with J.J. Hurtak, and study all of his teachings. He's the one that wrote the book, The Keys of Enoch. And one of the ancient chants that he had brought back with him when he disappeared and then came back was this chant that goes, Yod He Vod He. And so you can chant that if you feel that there's something discomfortable around you or in your house. And so I went through the house chanting that. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting up on my bed meditating, and I heard a knock on my door. And I could hear this like rusty wailing sound. And I hear this knock on my door, and I hear, Jeff, are you awake? And I said, yes, I'm meditating. And she said, are you decent? And I said, yes. And so she said, what is that noise? And I said, let's go check it out. And I said, maybe it's an attic fan or something. We were flipping switches. And she was a medium also. And she said, we may have flipped some switches, but I don't think this is electrical. I don't think it's an attic fan. And so we went outside, and it was funny because she was one of the most knowledgeable people I know, but she was hanging onto my arm and almost hiding behind me. And I looked up and I could see this wisp of smoke right there at the chimney. And I told it to go to the light. And I told it that there would be warmth and comfort there waiting for it. There would be these spirits there that would help to cross over. So watched it go up into the air and disappear. It gets that real. You know, we're all not accustomed to seeing it. We do have denial. We have our analytical mind. We have our skeptical mind. And in dealing with all those things, we can find ways to rationalize things out that we see every day. We can find a way to make anything acceptable to us and try to figure out when sometimes it's like the pyramids. How many different times now have they come up with, now they figured out how they did the pyramids? Wouldn't it be easier to say that there was just a higher technology on the earth plane at one time? Would that be so simple that it almost makes you feel comfortable? Instead of finding 10,000 different ways that they must have had all these people working together to lift these huge things and they've tried lifting them now with a crane, 5 cranes that were super cranes. And they bent the crane arms trying to pick up one of the blocks on a pyramid. And yet they're going to say that these people moved them. Sometimes the things people say cause us to have a frequency of disturbance within us rather than that feeling of comfort that lets us know that I'm hearing the truth. But these spirits I deal with almost every day. Liz, can I share the story of you and Ron the last time you were in? It was a reading, and I don't usually talk about readings without somebody's permission. Okay? You're okay with that?
I'm fine.
Ron, you're okay with that?
Yeah.
So Liz has been a friend of mine for a while and very knowledgeable, and I will tell you that she is like a validation point to me. If I get somebody calls up and tells me they want to have their house cleared, but they've been Baker acted in the past, they're on psychotic drugs or something, I'm going to call Liz and I'm going to say, I want to get your equipment out there. Let's get some validation. Let's find truth here. I'm not going to go in and start slinging energy or anything else. I want to have a validation. I want to know that it's not somebody's psychosis. So she is like a sounding board to me, and she has the equipment and the wherewithal and also some psychic ability to where she can tune into these things. Liz was here and I was doing a reading for her the last time she was here, and I said to her, stay close to Ron. Something is going on. There's a lot of spirits. Now, even remotely, if you open up enough, you can sense these things, you can feel these things. And I know when the ancestors, and that's what I was feeling around Ron, are coming in, there's a reason. And so I said, stay close to Ron. Something is going on. Something's about to happen. And like 3 days later, something like that, he had a stroke. And she got him to the hospital fast enough that he's still with us. With this big smiling face back there. Sort of. But there was a lesson in that was for me also. And that lesson was, we think that because somebody's on the other side, they're smarter. We think that somebody on the other side knows more than we do. But that's true through life. I mean, a lot of times we always think somebody else is greater than, when we're all just life itself. There is no real greater than or less than. But you would have thought that these spirits coming up were there to help him cross over. And that would have been my thoughts. So my lesson that I learned is, know that because we're physical, we still have free will. So even there's a potential for something to happen to where we need to be aware of. There could be a choice being made. At the same time, it's not complete. Even the spirits on the other side don't know the ending of what that choice is going to be. So our free will is stronger than what they may be feeling on the other side. So just because the spirits crossed over doesn't mean they've gotten smarter. Just because they're trying to give you advice doesn't mean you have to listen to them. And you would be amazed at how many times during the course of readings, the spirits that come in, a big part of their reason for coming in is apologetic. They weren't there for somebody. They had problems with alcohol, so they weren't there for a daughter or for a son. And they're feeling so bad about it, they're trying to immerse themselves into the person's life now that they have this time. And it's out of their own guilt that they're still carrying. So just because they went to the other side doesn't mean that they feel forgiven either. And so there's going all the way to the other side into this light, this perfect comfort, or not. And I can tell you that the spirits that are at unrest create a discomfort in you when you're around that energy. And that may be the beginnings of the fear that you may feel sometimes when you feel something's there that's spooky or you're not familiar with. It's only spooky if you allow it to be. But traveling around the world, I was up in Charleston and I've been in the dungeons underneath the city. Those dungeons are where they put the pirates. And sometimes the waters would come in and they'd just leave them down there and they would drown in those cages. But their life was such one of unrest, of discomfort, of discombobulation, that you can still feel that energy all the way through those dungeons. And the spirits that remain there still carry the energy in which they left this plane with. I went to the jails there in Charleston. They have these old jails where they used to whip people, and they used to sometimes whip them to death. And very, very unsettling. We started out with a large group, and they kept that whole tour close to the doors, the exits, because out of that large group, 4 of us finished that tour. There was Don and I and another couple that actually finished. Everyone else bailed. They started feeling too much discomfort. And some of the pictures that Don took, you could actually see spirits in those pictures. And so it's that real. The last time we were there, well, we were up in Savannah, and there was an incident where we were just in one room, and somebody sat on one of the chairs, and the lady said, "Please don't sit on the antiques." And we go into another room, and it's got like a bench there, and a couple people sat on the bench, and that seemed to be okay. And Dawn, for some reason, she said she doesn't even know why she did it, but she just felt like she had to move this direction, and she moved towards this one chair and sat down. The whole bottom fell out of the chair, and she wound up getting injured a little bit, scratched on the back and stuff. And I took a picture of the chair shortly thereafter, within a few seconds, and you can see clearly 2 orbs that are almost moving the direction that would have pushed her down and out of the chair. These things go on. But then on the other hand, I've been to the Vatican, and I've been beneath the Vatican where they keep the sarcophaguses of the popes. And it is a totally different energy. You feel nothing but peace there. You feel a comfort there. I've been to the catacombs of the Capuchin monks. I felt peaceful there. Now, these were people that were living, doing the right things because of religion. Ultimately, I'm not somebody that follows any religion. I believe they all have a purpose. And maybe some people need that kind of discipline in their life to keep them on a track that they'll be healthier when they cross over. They'll find more rest or more comfort in going to the light. But in each of us is that choice of how we live our life every day. What are we going to create for ourselves when we pass? I work with these 2 ancient crystal skulls. These have been passed down for 2,000 years from shaman to shaman for healing purposes. Do you think that could be quite an ego thing? Or do you find that to be something very humbling? Because if they've been doing healing work for 2,000 years with different shamans, then I'm nothing more than a small little space in time of getting to share their energy and to share their love. And what brings us even to a greater awareness is that we're all just here for a small amount of time. We'll spend much more time in the spirit world than we spend here. So how do we want to create that world for ourselves? What we do today creates our tomorrow. How we live our life, the choices we make, are all shaping our future. And it's up to us to make those choices that are going to bring us to a place of enlightenment, a place of greater power. Or are we going to wind up being afraid to cross over? That could be fun too. I could really try to scare people. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Now you've got up to 2 o'clock to ask a question. After that, I charge for the questions. Actually, after that, it's Ron's time to speak. Yes?
How do you, something that you had said kind of struck a chord with me, how do you reconcile, like, I have moments where like I'll feel or I'll see something, whatever, and I'm like, I'm crazy. I'm crazy, like, but I know I'm not, but.
You may be asking the wrong person that question, because when they let me out, they gave me a piece of paper saying that I wasn't crazy. I can actually prove I'm not crazy, and I'm not sure you can. No, to know the truth within your heart creates comfort. And I'm sure all of us, when we see something that others may say doesn't exist, we have to cross that boundary. But science itself, the occult, actually means an unproven science. Once it's proven, once enough people see it, and it becomes more of a normal than something that's forbidden to talk about, or you don't want to get involved in because it has spooky connotations. But within you, just know what you know, and trust your heart and trust what it is you see. It's like I said, the analytical mind and the skeptical mind can be our own worst enemy at times when we know what we see. It's like a UFO. If you see a UFO, you can go out and tell 10,000 people, I saw this, I know it's real. They didn't see it. It's up to them to accept whether they have faith in believing it's real. And unless they do see something that is monumental to where it changes a belief structure, they can choose not to believe anything they want. And we'll wind up wasting a lot of breath if we try to convince somebody of something they don't want to believe in. I learned a long time ago not to argue with somebody who is a fool. If you argue with somebody who is a fool long enough, soon those watching will begin to wonder which is which. Somebody else had a question back there. Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of new to all this. I watch shows about hauntings on television, and I know that a lot of it's, like you said, exaggerated, and maybe even some of it's staged, but they talk about spirits that are they're not like former human spirits, like ghosts, but they're demons. Do you believe in demons?
That is a really tough question for me to answer in a way that, well, I'll do my best. If everything is love and light in the Creator's universe, if everything was created from one light, then we have that one light. But in between worlds, in between the earthly plane and that spiritual plane, exists something called the astral realm. As a shaman, some of the healings I do, I have to go into the astral realm. So I walk between these worlds. In the spiritual world, it's like Eden. Everything is perfect. In the astral realm, it's the in-between world of this physical plane in which we're given free will. And things can be created on the astral realm through a collective consciousness thought process. If enough people give energy to the thought of something, then it begins to create in the astral realm, because those seeds will attract to each other. There's a magnetism in our thoughts. And so if enough people give thought to a presence they want to call the devil, while that energy can't exist in this higher realm, it is being created through our thought process, but so is illness. If we lived and walked in that perfect thought process that exists on the higher plane, illness would not exist on the earth plane. But we don't. We're given free will, and so through our free will, we can create and do things we know to be wrong. And that's how we learn. There's no judgment there of doing things that are wrong. We're just learning. But you look at the problems we create for ourselves, how we judge ourselves, how we judge others, and all of that's part of that process of learning. As we evolve, eventually we're going to see everybody around us and hold them in a conscious state of unconditional love and seeing the best for all of those around us. And the minute we start doing that, our life will be fulfilled. You'll find you can never feel alone. You'll find you can never feel abandoned. You just recognize this oneness with each person that's in our view every day. And so as far as those demonic forces that you're asking about, yeah, they're halfway real. They're in that in-between world that can cause problems on the earth plane. Do they have power in the spiritual realm? No. Do they have power over us? If we give it to them. That's our choice. But we can also refuse to give it to them by always staying in that place that keeps our consciousness above doubt, fear, lack, worry. And when we do that, then we're also creating a higher consciousness of our own lifestyle. Because if we can see ourselves always doing well and not be worried about everything we're doing, not have doubt, then we are always holding people in that space of seeing them the best they can be. And we're constantly giving that unconditional love that rises above that. And then we can eliminate those things that try from the astral realm to have a force here. They really have no power other than what we give them. Negative energy itself, if somebody sends negative energy to another person, whether it's jealousy, envy, hate, or even doing ugliness like spell work and stuff, can't exist under its own power. It has to be fed from something positive. And the reason how it gets fed is by the fear of the person that's being sent to. Half the time that's where it's getting its energy from. Otherwise they have to continually feed it, which means that their own energy is going to start having problems with health. So we need to always try to hold ourselves in that higher light existence. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
It was quite lengthy. It's like a lawyer, you ask him how a watch works and you may get a 20-minute lecture, or you ask him what time it is, you get a 20-minute lecture on how a watch works. You're not allowed to ask questions, you're just supposed to film.
Okay, so being an energetic sponge, and with the time that we are at now, what are ways that we can protect our space or even ourselves from all the excessive, even the Debbie Downers that you talk about? Yes, we can keep ourselves enlightened, but how do we protect our energy from being murky with the others around us and us having to deal with everyday life?
One of the greatest tools we have is knowing ourselves. If we take a moment every morning to ask how we're feeling, to ask what's going on with us, what are my emotions, and even pain. We can take on other people's pains when we have enough caring, when we have enough empathy. But if we know that this is where I'm at right now, and I make a periodic check throughout the day, then at that point, if something has shifted, I can ask what's changed around me, who's just been around me. Why have I got a change in my thought process? What am I absorbing from those around me? And we can absorb not only from each other, we can wear stones like chiastolite that'll help a lot of people that have empathic tendencies. We can sage. One of the best things we can do is take a bath. You can't over cleanse. So you can take a bath, fill it, put a cup of Epsom salt and a cup of apple cider vinegar in a bathtub and submerge yourself completely. And then as you come out of the bath, allow yourself to towel dry. Or not to towel dry, but to air dry. And it will continue to cleanse your space. You'll feel totally lighter. And even when you get a lot of debris around you where you're worrying too much, that can help clear that debris. And when we're worrying too much, we're actually feeding the energy we don't want to feed. That's just the process. The universe is an undiscerning vortex that gives you what you're asking for. It doesn't discern. It just sees what thought you're putting out and the energy going to it, and it's giving that to you. Because it's not going to try to figure out your lessons, because we're all creating our own lessons, and we're all basically a self-contained system of knowledge and the Akashic records within our own soul space of what we're here trying to learn. So what I give thought to, I'm creating. Whether it's seeing somebody being ill, whether it's seeing myself with lack, any of those things that I'm overthinking or giving too much thought to, I'm already starting to create. And so you always want to be careful what you're thinking about too much or what you're worrying about. And those things open up the doorways for lesser energies. When we walk in that sense of comfort and unconditional love, there's less opportunity for those things to come in. Even when we worry about somebody, we worry about their health, we're actually doing them a disservice. If we can hold them in that image of seeing them already healed, seeing love around them, then it's going to create this place of greater comfort within us, because we're doing the right thing for us to do. When you do the right thing, it's just as constructive as the difference between the pirates in those dungeons and the energy that I was feeling there in the Sistine Chapel and underneath the Vatican. So what we give energy to becomes our creation. And if nobody has any questions, it's time for Liz and Ron to take over. And I don't know if there's more people in the store.